Join me today for a new episode of HR Visionaries. Today we speak to BeatStars Sarah, and Sarah will tell us how BeatStars helps musicians to make a business. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hired, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to our new podcast episode of HR Visionaries. I have today Sarah as my guest. Sarah, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin, for having me. I appreciate it.
Sarah, can you tell us in a few sentences, who are you?
Yeah, sure. So Sarah Simmons, I'm currently the VP of People at BeatStars, which is a two-sided marketplace music tech company based out of Austin, but we have a globally fully remote organization. I've been working in startups for the last 15, 16 years. BeatStars is my fifth startup. So I guess who am I? I am a natural builder and I enjoy the startup entrepreneurial environment. So much so, I've spent my career for the most part doing just that and helping entrepreneurs and first time founders grow their businesses through people.
That's pretty amazing, and you have said so many things I want to follow up on. Can you tell us, so why did you choose to go into the HR space?
Yeah, well, it wasn't an intentional choice, actually. So I studied fashion design in my undergrad in Chicago, and I worked for about a year for a very successful online e-commerce company called customglamgirl.com, which is no longer in business, but we did like Britney Spears. I have the golden ticket tank and the Mariah Carey tour t-shirts and things like
Wow.
that. Um, and that was in Carmel, Indiana. So having studied in Chicago and then being in Indiana, I was like, well, where can I go that they still speak English and I can, pursue higher education? So I moved to London and I studied my master's in international business because I wanted to bridge both the fashion and the business side of things. And so I studied my MBA in international business in London at the American University there, off of Marylebone High Street. And I moved back to Chicago and thought I was going to find something, in the fashion space and merge, the fashion degree and business degree together. And that pursuit was harder than expected. I mean, in the fashion industry, you either have to be in New York or LA, and I was in Chicago, which is not necessarily considered a fashion hub, even though they have some things in the industry that are based there. And I ended up finding a gentleman who actually um, had started a consumer goods company. It was a cell phone and wallet case. And he basically hired me on the basis of if I was organized or not. And so that really changed the trajectory of my career. And I ended up, working with him. He was an older gentleman, had been retired since his 30s, had some money. He had retired from the, Board of Trade in Chicago and wanted to come up with this phone and wallet case for people walking their dogs or parents. And, I was doing a bit of everything there from the HR side of things, which I didn't even know it was called HR. I was just kind of doing things because they had to get done in terms of running, the back end of the business. But I also helped out in marketing. I helped out in sales. I was going to trade shows. I was doing a lot of different things, wearing many different hats, which I think served me well, especially in the startup space. And unfortunately, that was around the time when the first recession hit in '08, and I needed to find something else. So I coincidentally found another entrepreneur who had multiple startups, and I ended up working with him and helping build a couple of his companies in the Chinese media space, but focused in North America, but for affluent Chinese living and residing in North America. So did that for a number of years, and wanted something, a little bit more with stability. Both of the first two startups were self-funded and still in growth mode. And I ended up applying for a role that was in tech. And so that also was another kind of, pivotal point in my career, kind of getting exposed to the tech space. I had not really thought about tech or really knew much about it until I started working for a startup. And I ended up, staying there from 25 employees, growing with the business to almost 600. It was VC backed. So I stayed from Series A through Series D. So multiple rounds of funding. And that really got me exposure into what it's like to build, hyper build through chaos and also meet the demands of investors and our stakeholders. And the tech scene is a very different scene from other industries. I would say we're a bit spoiled, especially if you're VC or PE backed. And but it really changed how I approached the people space. And so that's really when I got my, feet deep into more of true talent experience and building companies through, people.
Actually, a pretty remarkable story, right? So many companies you have worked with, starting from zero to something, and how can I imagine being at a firm that grows from 25 to 600 people? So that you said it's a bit of chaos. There's obviously a lot of chaos, I assume. And how do you structure such a chaotic growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, it starts with understanding what vision is at the top, so really understanding the CEO's philosophy there around acquiring talent. And the directive was, hey, we want to hire and acquire talent from these big enterprise software companies. So set the bar high, and sky's kind of the limit. So while we didn't have endless funds, there definitely was a pool of funds that the business was willing to invest in terms of the people experience. So in order to do that, we had to quickly understand, what is that experience going to look like? How are we going to be intentional about building that? And what does best in class mean for us? And so I really tapped into my network of other HR professionals in tech, in the people space, and just kind of getting a gauge of what other companies were doing, especially in Chicago at the time, which is where I was based at the time. So, making sure that we had a candidate experience and a recruiting function that was amazing, right? Even if people didn't get the job, we wanted them to walk away thinking, wow, what a great opportunity, or what a great experience I've had through onboarding. Where does that hand over to the people ops team? How do we build a great onboarding experience where the employees know from day one what is expected, what do they need to do? And there can be a lot of ambiguity in that process right ahead of your first day. People have the nerves. And so we really were intentional with what our communications were going to be. And so if you kind of just take a step back in the moment of chaos to really identify and align with what's the philosophy, if there is one, from your leadership team, and then what tools and resources do you have to execute, and then start designing and creating. And so I unknowingly did this, but someone pointed out to me, a mentor pointed out to me, that, really what I'm doing is kind of taking a design thinking approach to building a product and applying that philosophy to the people experience. So now that's kind of my mantra, right? Is, kind of lead with empathy. So not necessarily what I think should be the outcome, but listening to, the end user, which are candidates and employees, on what their perception is of a great experience, or what problems do they have that they need help with. And then from the people side, we can start designing communications, processes, systems from there.
How do you find the right balance between managing, thinking about the right processes, and just acting? Because I think sometimes you feel like, okay, there's so much to do, and I now get ahead of the pack and get stuff done, while you kind of need to force yourself to maybe take a step back to think about the right approach. And I think that requires a lot of self-discipline, right?
Yeah, certainly. I think just getting started, right? Just taking that first step is half the battle. Don't get bogged down in analysis paralysis, but just start somewhere with something and compartmentalize the work. Because yeah, if you look at the end picture and where you want to be, it might be overwhelming to be like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get there? But break it down into digestible pieces so you can at least get started, right? That's what's step one, what's maybe a half step, and kind of going from there and kind of piecemealing it, and knowing just start incrementally. And maybe it's a phased approach. Maybe you can only do the first piece because you don't have the tools or the resources or the time to make everything, how you want it to be at the end. So what we do is not a kind of check the box and we're done either. It's a constant iteration of our work. And are we doing the right thing? Do we have the right processes? Do we have the right communication? Are we using the right tools? Are we over processing something? Are we over complicating this thing? And I think making sure that you're constantly evaluating that on a regular basis is really important, because especially if you're in growth mode, how you operate today is going to be very different from 6 months from now. And it's really important to make sure that you're kind of keeping up with the pace and the growth of the organization with how you're doing things from a operations perspective.
You mentioned that, communicating the founders vision to new employees, to existing employees is very important in this phase. What, how do you ensure closeness to the management board then?
I would say constant alignment, put regular one-on-ones on their calendar. I've always had regular one-on-ones with executive team members, with managers. Um, I've not been the type to be timid about, setting up time for a call or a meeting to go over things, because the last thing you want to do is not be aligned, go through all the work of setting something up, whether it's a new process or tool, and then come to find out at the end that, oh, you don't have the buy-in, right, from your leadership team. So I would say it's just a behavioral thing where you're regularly putting time on your executive team or your management's calendars. And I've been lucky enough to be in environments where it's always like an open door policy. And even if I didn't report directly to the CEO and there was someone in between me, I've never felt hindered by or putting time on, a CEO's or an executive's calendar. So typically I work very closely with leadership just to make sure we are aligned and understanding, the right philosophy, so that I have their buy-in, not only at the beginning, but throughout the process and at the end, to make sure that they too are coming along, the way with me or with my team, to ensure that they are still in line with what was agreed at the beginning. So, and things change. So you may have to pivot along the way. Maybe what the end result was going to be. Maybe something came up in the business, or there's been a strategy change, or there's a delay in something else that reprioritizes the shift of whatever the people team is working on. So it's really important to always be in line and, keep updates and informed leadership on a regular basis.
How do you communicate pivots well with your staff, given they may be emotionally very involved in something that it may now be less relevant to the company going forward? And how do you do this well to keep up motivation at a very high level, to keep up spirit high?
Well, I think in terms of the broader org, you mean, I would say if there is a change that might not land as positively as intended, to the organization, in order to keep spirits high and motivation up, to be transparent and as honest as possible. I think, employees are adults, and at the end of the day, they're going to read between the lines, and, they may have certain context or not of what's happening in the business. But if you leave a matter unsaid and you leave the blanks blank, guess who's going to fill in that information? The receiver, right? So it's best to just fill in those blanks for them, so that there's no guessing or stories created that can go awry and people catch on and it could blow up into this massive thing that was not intended. So my best advice is to fill in the blanks for the people, be as transparent as possible, and then follow up with smaller conversations, especially with org-wide communication. Have your team managers conduct, a quick group meeting for the team after something big has been announced, just to get a pulse on their team, and also to show compassion and empathy to what might be happening or going on. It's always good to show that you are listening, right? And people have spaces to share their voice and be heard, and have that filtered back up to leadership. And I've always, kind of been that business partner to managers to check in and ask, hey, what is your team sharing with you? What are their concerns? What concerns are they bringing to you? That way you can pull themes from a people perspective on, okay, maybe there's a theme. I've heard this in multiple departments now. This is something we should look at or address. But going back to your original question, it's be as transparent as possible and fill in the blanks so others don't fill in the blanks and make up worse stories than what the reality is.
So was your next career step then joining BeatStars?
Yeah, I had moved on from that hyper growth company to another company, tech company in the affiliate marketing space, and was going back to kind of building phases there as well. They ended up being acquired by a much larger company, so the role ultimately changed from what I had envisioned, and the founders were leaving, and it was a whole, structural change. So actually a recruiter, I wasn't looking because I was kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. And a recruiter reached out to me and had a conversation and met the CEO and thought, okay, here's someone who seems authentic and genuine, and I could tell could use some help, which is very common, and right, a founder, CEO, and thought the opportunity was really exciting. So literally 2 weeks later, had an offer, and now it's been about a year and a half since I've been here.
What did catch you at BeatStars? Is it well, is it art in general? So since you studied you studied something artistic, is it that theme again?
That is true. It is very artistic. I definitely feel, you always wonder sometimes, like, what's next? Where can I be? I've had other leaders where I'm like, okay, is this really what being an executive means? And I question, like, okay, if the bar is there, I definitely can set the bar higher, right? So I kind of have evaluated my own experience and leaders that I have, and put that in the context of what's next for me. And I strongly believe that, your path that people go down, especially mine, happens for a reason. And I always pray to for God to give me not what I want, but what I need. And I've just seen a theme in my career where that has fruitioned, right? Some an opportunities come up that I didn't know, I wasn't necessarily wanting, but I've been put on a path to where I'm needed, what's needed both for me and the other person or the other company. And I strongly believe that that is very much my journey, especially here at BeatStars. I can relate, right, to that creative brain. It's different than working with other leaders that I've worked with in the past. There is a different energy. You know, people in our org tend to be more visual people and visual learners, as am I. So there's a lot of similarities that I can relate to, which help me do my job right here, especially in a very creative space. But also, what keeps me here is the passion and the tie to the community that is so apparent. A lot of our employees um, actually are community members. They're producers, music creators, or have experience working in the music industry. And they can really relate personally to our mission of helping musicians, creators, producers make a living from selling their beats. And um, I've not seen that much passion, right? At previous organizations. Like, okay, other organizations, people can rally behind selling this enterprise software, but here it's like we're actually helping individuals and we're changing their lives. And, our CEO, Abe, he gets emails every week of community members sharing how BeatStars has changed their life, whether it's they've been able to buy a house or buy a car, put food on the table, or take care of their family. Those are really inspiring when you can actually hear and see the change that you're creating because of the work that you do and the organization that you're a part of is a very high motivator for the people that work for BeatStars. And it's no different for me as well.
Yeah, I feel this is really, really fascinating because, well, for many musicians, many people who are very gifted, very talented, it's really difficult to make a living. And when you hear about statistics, how many people can live, well, from what they basically produce in terms of in terms of music output in a general term. It's a very tough life, right?
Absolutely. It's, we have producers making six figures from our platform. We have a lot of producers who this is their livelihood. This is their job. This is how they make money. And we're able to support that. But yeah, the music industry is a very nuanced kind of dog eat dog industry. And I'm learning, about the music industry as well. And to think about, our community members who are in India or Africa or Europe, they wouldn't have access to get to Beyonce's, Drake, Lil Nas team, right? To listen to their beats if BeatStars didn't exist. And so we're creating these opportunities to connect. And why that word community is so strong for us is that we are making those connections through our marketplace, through our platform. Otherwise, what would these people do? Travel to meet these people, to try to get access and heard? It's highly unlikely.
Yeah, and well, or sell the CDs at the railway station, right? So stuff
Yeah,
like that, right? So it's
exactly.
it's not really efficient at all. And can you tell us a bit more about how BeatStars actually works? So it's I think always amazing if you get a marketplace going because it's well, it's perhaps or when you look around, so there aren't that many successful marketplaces, right? So because you need so many stakeholders, need to keep so many stakeholders happy. So it's quite an achievement to get a marketplace running well.
Yeah. Abe has, was thinking about the title of your podcast, Visionaries. I don't know if I consider myself a visionary. I feel that's a very
Sure.
heavy title to carry. But Abe is certainly a visionary. He really pioneered what is BeatStars today 15 years ago, because he himself was an artist and he was looking to buy beats, right, to rap on. And he was in AOL chat rooms. And that fruition to BeatStars, that was BeatStars, point five. uh, and so, he's built BeatStars to the point where the community members know him, industry members know him. He has a long following. He is a thought leader in the space. People really respect his voice and his opinion, because 15 years ago, he was talking about what we're seeing today in terms of access and music. And he's very inspiring when he speaks, because you could tell how fast his brain is thinking, because he's always 10 steps ahead of what's coming. And so when you ask about how BeatStars got started and how we're able to have a successful marketplace, it's really from Abe and the community and relationships that he's built over the years. And we by far surpass traffic and users coming to our platform than anyone next to us trying to do the same, because of that history. And so when community members come to our platform, they can expect a two-sided marketplace. We have buyers and we have sellers. The sellers are the music producers, and I like to think of it as like an end-to-end place where music producers can come to operationalize how they sell their music. And so when they come to our platform and they want to sell, they have their own space and they can buy promote ads to get featured to the buyers. So it's like a business. We're helping them run their own business and they can upload their beats and be heard, and really operationalize how they're able to sell music on our platform. And then we have the buyers who we're known in the industry, so people know to come to BeatStars to check us out. And like I said, Drake, Lil Nas, Beyonce, they all have hit songs from our marketplace. We had several Grammy winners last year. We just found out last week that we have several more Grammy noms this year from our platform. We've had producers that have been on soundtracks and have milestones every week, actually. And so there's a lot of traction and great outcomes for our community members by being a part of our marketplace, and a lot of success stories that we can be proud of. And our goal is to keep that momentum and, keep that momentum going and increase that momentum and continue, having a platform where producers and buyers know that they can trust BeatStars because of the quality and success of our producers are coming to us, and they're using our platform as an end-to-end solution for their music careers.
Well, you mentioned before that you're all remote. How does that work in terms of company culture? How do you manage to build one team in a rapidly growing environment that is also remote?
Yeah, it's right. The question of 2020 to now. I think very intentionally, I think, it is important to make time to connect and build relationships. I know the word empathy has been shared a lot in the past several years, but if you don't have a relationship to build on, you're not going to have empathy necessarily for the other person. But if you have a personal connection with the people that you work with, even just to get to know them a little bit more beyond, hey, do you have this thing that's due today for me yet or not? Then you can be more empathetic when times do get tough and things are due and there are stressful deadlines or you're under pressure. And so we've set up a donut channel and we call it Virtual Coffee. It pairs randomly two people together every month. Just, for people who aren't as comfortable reaching out and setting up time, they can be a part of this kind of automated system. We have monthly social hours with different themes that our people ops team creates, and it allows people to connect beyond their workday every month. We have a biweekly all hands where we have shout outs. We also have our recognition channel so we can amplify wins and successes of our team members, where we don't have light into every day if we're not working closely with them. Other team members and managers can shout out their teams. And we're doing a lot of connection activities. So our people team helps facilitate different cross-functional as well as department connection moments where we play games and just get to know each other on a deeper level. So we do a lot of that. I think it's part creativity, part finding time, and part applying different angles to building relationships and having fun with it. Not taking ourselves too seriously, but having fun, getting to know people. And then, there are times when we've been able to meet in person. I do think work can get done virtually and remotely. We can build connection remotely, but there's nothing like building that connection and relationship in person. So there have been times throughout the year where certain team members are able to travel and get together. We certainly want to do more of that. And, we'll try to focus on that this coming year as well. Being globally dispersed, it makes it a bit of a challenge with time zones. So we have to get creative there as well, whether it's recording a session so it's available for access for people who can attend, or shifting times by 30 minutes or what have you, can help a lot for team members, across the globe. So there's, we created a global working guide to help team members kind of navigate, the virtual work and the tools and the resources that we have to create connection, but also being mindful of being inclusive too in this environment. Especially with messaging and tone, right? A lot can be lost in Slack and email when you just don't have that, phone call. 5-minute phone call can solve a lot of problems very quickly than going back and forth in a Slack. And so it's also reminding them, like, hey, your behaviors and how you show up are actually what's driving culture. And culture simplified is, what do you permit and what do you promote? And that comes down to individual behavior as well as collective behavior. And so we focused a lot in various training frameworks around behavior. Are you aware enough of how you're showing up, the behaviors that you're showing up with, how is that landing on others, right? And I speak a lot about intention versus impact. Whether we have good intentions, but our impact may be negative, we still have to be accountable for the negative impact. So we talk a lot about behaviors, and those can show up in a variety of ways. So there's no one answer. It's not a one size fits all. We try different things and we'll continue to try different things as we get feedback from team members on what's working, what's not working, what would they like to see. We've heard, more gamification of social hours, more in-person connection. So all of those things we consider as we continue to iterate, right? As I mentioned at the beginning of our call, it's not a check the box and we're done. We'll continue to iterate and build on what we started.
You mentioned before that it's super important as a leader to show empathy towards your colleagues, towards your employees. And did you have any hints on how to build up a great level of empathy so that people who might lack empathy can learn to be more approachable?
Yeah, I think empathy, and people may confuse empathy with agreeance, and empathy is not agreeance. Empathy just means you are able to listen to someone else and let them share their voice, and you get to share yours. And so making sure that you have a space for people to speak up, share their voice, share their opinion, even if it's different from yours. But empathy starts with emotional intelligence and self-awareness. If you don't have self-awareness, which is the foundational piece of EI and creating empathy, it's going to be hard to get there. So we actually rolled out an emotional intelligence building with empathy learning session, and we have the EI rubric, which starts with awareness. And so as I was talking about behaviors, we talk a lot about awareness because that is half the battle. Like, are you going through your day like a robot, or are you aware enough of like how you're responding, speaking, and showing up to a meeting with that much level of awareness that you can control your behavior, control what you say or what you don't say. Sometimes what you don't say is just as important as what you do say. And so if you don't have that, let's start there. Let's continue working on that. I don't put a sticky note up on your screen or your wall to give you pointers. So if you're in those meetings or calls, you have that level of awareness. Put a calendar reminder weekly to revisit it. But again, it starts with the individual and their behavior.
What should be written on that sticky?
What would be written on the sticky? Well, a reminder to like, hey, stop, pause. Are you aware of how you're feeling in this moment? Are you angry, sad? Okay, maybe you should wait to reply. Hey, remember EI, look at the EI rubric. Are you aware of how you're showing up in the moment? Whatever trigger phrase reminds the person that, oh yeah, there's a human on the other side of this. What is my role, right? Am I a executive? Am I an individual contributor? Because it does matter. The power dynamics matter. I mean, if you're a leader and you say certain things in a meeting, that has more weight than an individual contributor. And so do you have awareness of your role and the weight of your role and how you're showing up in meetings?
You also mentioned that you have implemented a recognition channel on Slack. can you let us know how this exactly worked? Because I always feel that, well, recognition is always tough to balance, right? So it might be frustrating for some if others are mentioned very often, despite they deserve to be mentioned very often. So it's really difficult to be fair on a recognition channel, is it?
Well, I suppose one could perceive it that way. Our recognition channel is tied into our performance management tool called Lattice. We use Lattice for performance, one-on-ones, recognition, surveys. And so we can tie in our leadership principle to the recognition. So I think it's really important for people to see what does that leadership principle look like. Mm-hmm. And we have verbiage of how each of our leadership principles show up for managers as well as individual contributors. And I think framing the recognition is really important. You know, it's one thing to be like, thanks for sharing that doc with me. Teamwork, yay. I mean, I've been in orgs where it doesn't become as valuable because people share, thanks for sharing their, creamer or sharing their pencil. Like it becomes less valuable.
Mm. And unless you desperately need a pencil, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, it does show that, some people are more comfortable just saying thanks, and some people don't want public recognition. So I think it starts with understanding your team members and what do they actually appreciate and value, right? My manager asked me when he started, how do I like to receive praise? Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't necessarily need public praise. A simple thank you works for me. I don't mind it. I'm not embarrassed by it, but some people are. So I think it's important how the recognition is phrased and framed. So people see, okay, that's how that leadership principle is showing up. Again, going back to those behaviors, right? I actually just shouted out a team member who was off, and we had a project and we're pulling data points, and, I praised her for taking extreme ownership and I took the phrase right out of the behaviors of what that looks like. So people knew, oh, that's what extreme ownership looks like. Do I do that? Am I doing that? So it also triggers this, hey, awareness around, am I taking extreme ownership too? But I had a manager comment recently who's like, well, I'm afraid to use recognition because some people may perceive that this person isn't doing a good job. And I said, but it's your responsibility as a manager to shed light on what that person is doing because you're closest to their work. And that way, for the people who you think may perceive that this person is not doing a good job, you're shedding a light on those smaller moments so that they can see, hey, maybe there is a part of this person's work that they're doing well in. So you help kind of eliminate the biases that might. So picking up where, talking about how employees would want to receive praise and potential perception that there's bias. One of the ways that we first understand where employees want to be praised, we simply ask them, what is your preference? Some employees don't want public praise. Some are satisfied with just a thank you from their manager and that being private, and that's okay too. Um, but I understand the idea if there is a public channel for praise, how that could be perceived if there's this one or a few people that are constantly the only ones being praised, that could have a perceived bias, right? That there's favoritism, or there's always these specific people that are getting the constant recognition. And one of the ways that we try to eliminate the bias is how we give the recognition, right? I think not only saying thank you, but evidencing what behaviors were shown or exhibited for that person to receive the recognition is really important. And we have a set of leadership principles where we have clear descriptions for each leadership principle, both as a manager and as an individual contributor, what it means in terms of that definition and how the behaviors show up within the organization and from that person. And so when you frame the recognition a specific way, I think that's equally important to show, hey, that's what extreme ownership looks like, or that's what having a bias for action looks like. So it's more meaningful, but it's also giving an example of the behavior itself. And when you can be clear and specific about that, there's little argument to say, well, okay, maybe this person is just arbitrarily being recognized for whatever mediocre work or whatever that perception is. So that's one way. Another way is to diversify the recognition. It's not a one size fits all, and we don't have just one channel for recognition either. We have our On the Beat newsletter, which is a monthly newsletter that our people team puts together, and we give shout outs and we call it Recognize a Rock Star. So we solicit inquiries from managers when we're putting that together, like, hey, who would you like to recognize and for what? Again, we try to tie our leadership principles to that example as well. We also have our leadership principle awards when in every town meeting that we have, which is our quarterly town hall, we solicit from the whole organization nominations for the leadership principle awards, and we ask team members to give an example of what leadership principles are showing up or why you're nominating the person. That gets filtered to their manager to write a summary and also support the nomination, and then that goes to our executive team to review and decide who the two winners will be every town hall. And so that's a large venue or avenue to share our leadership principles on a broader scale, but also to show, like, there's been layers of eyes on these nominations, and based on exemplary scenarios that are provided as to why that person should be recognized, that's how the winners are chosen. And so again, going back to that, being specific with examples and how the behaviors are showing up, I think is really important in recognition. And the winners get a plaque. We make it fun. They get a plaque because we're a music tech company. So it's like, you've gone platinum, right? And they have their name engraved in what leadership principle they're being recognized for. And it's fun. Once they arrive, they share pictures, and people feel honored by that. So it's a inexpensive but impactful way to elevate recognition and praise in a meaningful way.
I find that actually pretty cool, and I think what you just mentioned is super interesting in terms of well, in particular for a tech company to keep everyone on board, given well for sales, impact can be measured kind of easily, right? So, but on the other hand, for a developer who has been working on a specific feature, which adds like a lot of value, however, may not be very visible for most of the company, it's then sometimes really hard to make sure that both are equally recognized. So therefore, I really like that we had the chance to talk about this for so long. It's very cool indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, seeing what works for the organization, being consistent, putting in guidelines too for the recognition. Um, Highly recommend tying it to core values, your leadership principles, which is what we call our core values here at BeatStars. And then putting in criteria for who gets, awarded for certain recognition levels. We also have an anniversary program. So based on tenure, every year it kind of gets better and better. You can upgraded your recognition and praise. But that's another fun way to say thanks and recognize people for their tenure and their contributions to the organization. So we try to make it fun. We try to diversify. We try to do lightweight touches that are easy for managers and peers to recognize, but then we also have significantly more impactful ways to recognize in our town hall through various approvals and buy-ins from peers, managers, and executive team.
Cool. Sarah, thank you so much for your insights. It's been super cool talking to you, in particular, like how you how you encourage your organization well to stay very stay very focused in this remote setup, to have a recognition policy that engages everyone. It's absolutely amazing. Thanks a lot for that, Sarah. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Benjamin. I appreciate getting to know you more, and thank you for giving the platform to have the conversation.
Thanks again, and well, to all of you, thanks a lot for listening in. I think we learned a lot from Sarah, in particular when it comes to recognition. So I hope there were also very interesting insights for you in there. And have a good one. See you next time.